Welcome again to our European conference. Last night I welcomed you all to that wonderful dinner, but that was pleasure. Today is more work. So welcome again to our 16th European conference. Originally, this meeting was just to be an executive meeting, but when FT told me of her plans for the meeting, which included visits to historical sites and outside speakers, it seemed just a small step to upgrade to a European conference. Luckily, FT and Augustina agreed, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for the wonderful event we are experiencing. The next hurdle was the title. Greece is known as the cradle of civilization, so we wanted to include some history, something about the present, and particularly a look at the future. This took some time to finalise and involved many emails, to such an extent that my internet provider threatened to cut me off. As you all know, or should know, ICJW aims to promote a just society based on human rights and Jewish values. So it was important that our basic ethos was included in the event. I'm delighted that we have such a wide representation here for the conference. 17 of our 37 affiliates are represented, and I welcome you all. I particularly welcome our Greek members, who are all new and I think very enthusiastic. Thank you all for your hospitality and for your input. Enjoy all the speakers that you will hear over the next couple of days. All are very important women in their respective fields, and I'm sure that we will all go away from here whenever we leave, impressed, enthused, and really well educated.
What's the value, what's the substance behind an organization? When we think of names of people, what are names of people that we remember? What associations do we put with people when we meet them? And so I'm going to start off with a short story before we turn to the Torah portion. So when I was living, was working and I'm still working for the Lauder Foundation, and I was living in Berlin. And it was one of my first weeks there, and I walked into the synagogue. It was a Shabbat morning, and they were reading the Torah portion. And okay, like most, I spaced out a little bit. I started, to doze off a little bit, and I slowly realized that the women's section was filling up. Many people were coming. And all of a sudden, my focus came back when there was a girl. She was about 16 years old. And everyone was wishing her mazel tov and smiling, and she was crying and laughing, and everyone was hugging her. And I thought to myself, well, she's a little young to have a baby. And afterwards, I asked the person next to me, and they said, actually, this girl had come from a Soviet background, and she had come to Berlin to learn, and it was the first time that she decided she wanted to take a Jewish name. And this was the ceremony in the synagogue. They had made a little blessing and had sort of named her. And I'm going to pose the question to you that I thought to myself, which was, okay, if I had to choose my own name, what would it be? What would I call myself? Who would I be named after? Many of you have children, so you've had a chance to name somebody else, right? But there's a thought process that goes into that naming scheme, that naming idea. So in this week, we find ourselves at a week now between two Torah portions. We have the previous portion of Noah, the story of Noah and the flood, and this upcoming week portion of Lech Lecha, where we're introduced to the character of Abraham. And after the story of Noah in Bereshit, in chapter 10, we're presented with a whole list of genealogy. We have the story of Noah and all his sons, and his sons and sons and sons, and it's about 50 verses of father, son, all the names of the children, and suddenly, smack in the middle, we have the story of the Tower of Babel. the Migdal Babel, which has no names associated with it whatsoever. And I'll specify the story a bit. The Torah tells us, for those in Hebrew, Kol haaretz safa achad udvarim achadim. They were all one language. They were unified. And they said to themselves, they said to one another, Hava nibnei lanu ir umigdal, v'rosho b'shamayim, v'naseh lanu shem pet nafot al pnei kol haaretz. They said to one another, let us build a city and a tower, with the top to the sky, and let us make a name for ourselves, so that we should not be scattered upon the face of the earth. So we have this group of people who want to be remembered, right? They're unified, they come together, they want to leave a legacy. It doesn't seem like such a terrible thing to be unified. And the Torah continues to tell us that God went down and he saw the city and the tower, and he saw that these people were unified, and he said, I see what they started to do. I don't like this. They're going to be able to do anything. And so he came in, confused their language, and scattered them all throughout the world. Of course, all the biblical commentaries come and they jump on this and say, okay, what's going on? What did they do that was so bad? It doesn't seem so terrible. We're all here unified for a cause, right? It sounds great. And so they have a number of different answers. One says, okay, they were trying to reach the sky so that water could come out. Another says that they were actually trying to fight against God. They were trying to see how high they could possibly get. Another more recent answer that I heard was, when they built the tower, but they built it from the inside of a valley. Now, if you were really trying to wage war against God, you would build it from the top of the mountain. You wouldn't build it from inside the valley. So actually, they were trying to actually observe all the people and control all of the people that lived underneath them. They were acting like God. But a more modern Tanakh thinker, Menachem Leibtag, has a whole sort of idea, develops an idea on this section, and he says that the fault was, and based on the Ramban as well, that the fault was they wanted to make a name for themselves. What were they trying to do? They neglected and ignored the fact that they had a divine purpose. So this generation, they weren't as bad as their predecessors, the generation of the flood, right, that were actually immoral and doing things that were wrong, but rather they were trying to create a society that was focused on man and not focused on God. And Rav Leibtag explains that when God split up their language, what he was actually doing was creating separate nations. And only when you have different nations, only until you have a cause that unifies people together, will people come together. They'll sort of overcome that language barrier to be able to join together for a common unified goal. And with the emergence of Abraham, which is only half a chapter later, we find right in the beginning, right, God tells him, go from your land, go from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I'll make you a great nation and bless you and make your name great. The first thing, in contrast to the previous section, is actually God says, I will make your name great. And Abraham, he didn't ask for his name to be great. He didn't need to be remembered, right? But despite that, God specifically goes out and says to him, no, people will remember your name. They will remember what you stood for. And why did Abraham sort of deserve such a blessing? It was the fact that he didn't care about his own name. Everything that he was doing for the sake of God. He was doing for a divine purpose. And we see that in one of his first actions as he travels. He actually builds an altar, and he calls out, and it says, right, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, he calls out in the name of God. And it is exactly for this purpose that he is remembered. Now, we don't need to go much farther than our own Torah to realize that actually the prophets tell us this as well. So in Isaiah, and many of you may be familiar with this verse, because it's actually the source of the name from Yad Vashem, which is a Holocaust Memorial and Museum in Israel. And I'll read. Thus said God, observe what is right and do justice, for soon salvation will come. And I'm skipping a little bit. I will give them a name in my house and within my walls, a monument and a name, better than sons or daughters. I will give them an everlasting name which will never perish. So Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, teaches us, if we observe what is right and what is just, then we'll have an everlasting name. After I did look at ICJW and see the causes that it promotes, I started to realize, okay, what is our purpose here today? And part of our purpose is exactly that, right? To rally for women's causes, for Jewish causes, for humanity, for humane causes. And it's not the name of the organization that makes a difference, right? It's actually to promote what is doing right and to raise awareness about this. And I think, obviously, doing all this through a Jewish organization also brings in this idea, right, of a divine purpose, that we're doing this not just for ourselves or to be noticed, right, but actually because we do believe this is, through the Jewish way, right, what is the correct way to live. So I'll end off with a short personal reflection. I'm here teaching in Athens, and part of the program that I work with for the kids, we not only get classroom studies, and then we also have trips. So we went to visit the synagogue in Rhodes. We go to a number of different synagogues around Greece. We went to the island of Rhodes, which has a very rich Sephardic history. And I told all the kids, okay, we heard from the tour guide all the history, and at the end I told the kids, okay, take a minute and go walk around the synagogue, and there's a book on the, a book on the wall, similar to the memorial here that you'll see in Athens, with all names, all Jewish names of the Jews that lived in Rhodes. And I told them, okay, go tell me if you see your name in that book. And everyone ran over, and part of when they had to write back to me after what they remembered, that's what they remembered, right? So they may, when you teach kids, they may not remember everything that you teach them, or we may not remember all the details or all the, where and when and what and who, right? But you'll remember that connection. You'll remember, there's a very beautiful quote, right? They never, in education, but it's used in many times, they never remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel, right? And I think, part of being here today, I think we're all gathered for this purpose, and we should, hopefully develop this connection and to be able to promote goodness in the next couple of days. I wish everybody an inspiring and fulfilling conference.